Hi! Holy crap, it's starting. Hi, everyone. Welcome to BL in non-BL industries. This is kind of going to be a look at BL marketing. So to BL or not BL is kind of the question our marketers ask. Hi, everyone. So let me get to my PowerPoint and let's get started. So just a little bit about me. My name is Kit. I am seasoned because we don't need to get into my age. Non-binary, arrow, and bi. You can use she, they for my pronouns. So what exactly makes me a subject on this? An expert on this subject. I can read, don't worry. I have 7 years in the marketing industry as a copywriter. I've been employed in the anime, comic, and gaming industry for over 8 years. I've been a member of BL Garden for over 6 years. And of course, I've been a fan of the BL industry for 20-ish plus years. So I've got a lot of experience, I guess you could say. Before we get started, I just want to go over a couple of things. I will be avoiding any specific names of companies and individuals because we do still have people in our club and staff that are currently employed by some companies, and technically I'm still employed by some. And, you know, we'd like to keep our jobs. Any opinions made by me do not reflect the stance of certain companies, individuals, or countries, of course. I will try not to name any specific titles, but sometimes slip of the tongue. Definitely won't be naming anything that I have an NDA on, of course. This presentation is just meant to be kind of informational and help all of you fans understand the workings of the industry and why certain things are handled in specific ways. And I'm going to try not to confirm or deny any assumptions you may have, you know, just again to keep CYA, basically. So just keep that all in mind, and hopefully you understand why, because, you know, jobs, paycheck, things like that. All right. So there is a big difference between the BL-focused industries and the companies that just happen to offer BL content. Obviously, we have our BL-focused companies like Sublime, June, Futakiya, and then Renta Yaoi. They are the companies that can primarily and do primarily focus on BL content. And then we've got companies that just so happen to offer the content. Maybe they have a 1 or 2 series. Maybe they get, you know, a handful of series and offer it as like its own bundle. And that's going to be places like Crunchyroll, Funimation, Sentai Filmworks, Ascendant Animation, Yen Press, Tokyo Pop, Seven Seas, Renta, Tapas, Pocket Comics, Tappy Toon, Manta, Lazen, and Genius Inc. Games. Just because they have BL content does not make them BL companies, of course, because they also focus on other anime and doujin, manga, all of that. They have a wider spectrum of genres, and so their focus is not primarily on BL, and that's important for later on. To start off, we're going to kind of go from an obvious stance of why antis are so problematic from a marketing stance. We already know that antis are just a big pain in the ass for us as a whole. I mean, they cause problems, you know, just to cause problems, but they actually are not so good when it comes to marketing. For non-BL focused companies specifically, when they have negative reactions on like social or, I mean, really in any space, that does affect them, especially in the anime industry, because while it has significantly blown up in the recent years, I mean, especially compared to like when I first got into the anime industry, it is still a niche market. It's still small enough that when you're told by an entire community or an entire huge group that, hey, we're going to stop buying from you, they actually do have to worry about that. So when you have antis coming in and, you know, responding to content in a negative way, the backlash does tend to get a hair trigger reaction and, you know, a knee-jerk reaction, that kind of thing. So you've probably seen this on social with certain companies. And this reaction is like when certain advertising for BL company or BL companies, BL titles is maybe pulled down when these non-BL companies are trying to advertise them. Like some campaigns maybe use like there are those social games where it's like build a BL character kind of game that, you know, somebody's trying to just do on their social to maybe promote a new BL comic or a BL anime series that they just got a hold of. And when aunties come in saying, hey, you making this is promoting, you know, bad stereotypes or it's pedophilic or things like that, it's really going to affect that company that isn't BL focused, and they're going to pull it down. And it has happened to me. I've actually tried to run a campaign when I was running a certain company's Twitter, and we had an issue where we had one of those story type games, and it was like, hey, build your own BL character. And it was based off the like, help me draw a cat boy. So it's like based on how many comments you were supposed to your followers were going to help you draw like your own BL character. And it had, you know, okay, first comment is this character, you know, uke seme switch. And that triggered a lot of aunties to start commenting on the post, and it got really bad to the point that they were sending in people who didn't even follow the account to comment, and it did have to get pulled down. And it's really unfortunate that this kind of stuff happens, because with BL focus companies, they have the advantage of knowing that aunties are a thing, that they're a problem, and that they know that no matter what they say, they're never going to sell to aunties, so they can ignore them. But non-BL focused companies can't. Unfortunately, they are selling material that these people will still buy. And if big enough groups are, you know, deciding that they're going to, you know, rally against them because of this one post, well, that's enough that they're like, we have to play it safe. We've got to take it down because this is affecting our other merchandise. This is affecting our other titles. So that's, it sucks. And what's worse is when things like this happen, even when it only happens 1 or 2 times, it starts to make the marketing teams very paranoid. Hello, bug. So backlash will start to make the brand managers, who are the people who tend to approve content created by the creative team, and they'll get very particular. One example is, you know, we were trying to create just a nice, simple banner to advertise brand new BL comics. And we had the copy, fresh new BL. That was it. Very simple, very fun and clean. It was brand new. And our one of the brand managers was like, oh, I don't think we can use fresh. And we were like, why? And she was like, well, people are going to assume it means like fresh young boys, like, you know, fresh meat. And we were like, what? Why is your mind going down this path? Like, no one's going to jump from like fresh like mint, fresh new titles to fresh young boys. Like, ooh. But that's what happens, because as we are all familiar with, aunties do mental gymnastics to prove in some way that you're a pedophile, that you're, you know, touching people, that you're, you know, committing sexual acts of terror, that it does make people who are not familiar with the BL industry as a whole, it makes them paranoid. So that's one or a couple ways why aunties are so problematic from a marketing stance, which leads me into a lot of reasoning of why didn't they do this? So when you're looking at a lot of Japanese content, you'll see that like, oh God, they made such a pretty release, or, oh wow, they included this, they did that, and they did this with their marketing, and they clearly showed these 2 characters are a ship. Like, why didn't we do that for our release? Why didn't our US release get that? Well, lot of reasons why, actually. So beyond dealing with backlash from antis and just fans in general, before a U.S. company can even put out assets to American audiences, they have to go through approvals from the Japanese licensors. And Japanese licensors, they tend to have a whole different strategy in marketing versus the US. They don't always understand our executions and ideas. We don't always understand theirs. They sometimes just like to show spoilers and trailers and spoilers on the back of packaging, whereas we're like, hey, that makes people mad. And there's a lot of back and forth that can occur. And a lot of times the licensor may be like, yeah, I know we have this really good piece of art, but you can't have it. We don't know why they say that, but that's just what happens. They'll be like, hey, we've decided you're only getting this folder of assets and that's all you can use. So when you see like the Japanese release of like maybe I think Promare, and it had like, you know, the really nice clear pack slip, whatever, and like all these different art assets, and then the US versions kind of use the same piece of art over and over again. That's just licensors preventing the US releases from doing more and limiting what they're able to do. Not only that is licensors may not improve an entire campaign. So while BL companies obviously have nothing but BL content, so they're going to be able to do campaigns that focus completely on BL series and, you know, the couples and everything. Even when an American or a non-BL company gets a BL title, they may not be able to do anything with it. They may barely be able to advertise it, both because of the licensor being like, yeah, we don't want to give you anything and we've sat on the approval, so you don't really have any time, and we still want this released by the date you told us it would be out. So they can put a stop to a lot of things. And this also happens with regular anime titles. It's definitely not limited to BL, but there's definitely a lot more holdup with BL titles. And I mean, it does come from both sides. A lot of times there is a little bit more interference on the American side, though. And that is because of, you know, brand team, marketing team, and of course the VP of the company. Because when you think of marketing, you're probably immediately picturing a cis white man in a business suit. And that's absolutely correct for most marketing companies. They're the ones who are on top making final decisions, and that can affect a lot of how things are marketed and what decisions are made and what gets allowed. So that's a fun little thing. Now, that's not the case for every company. I mean, I have worked with some companies where on top we were blessed with diversity and different ideas, but it still also comes down to when a company is not completely BL focused, they just don't understand the fan base and they don't know how to deal with backlash. So, yay. So when it comes to licensors in Japan, like I was saying, anime marketing is totally different for Japan. And when it comes to us, they have different demands. They sometimes may decide they want it done their way over here, which also means that sometimes they write their own copy and it's not translated in the best way, and we're not allowed to edit it. And as a writer, that's very hard. But you can't argue with the licensor, because then they'll take the title away and then you don't have it anymore. And then you have to try and explain to fans, why doesn't this get a home video release, without telling them you pissed off the licensor, which isn't so easy. So, another thing that a lot of fans will get disappointed on is, why didn't this series get a home video release? And this is especially true for BL titles, because let's be real, there's not a lot of series out there that have made it to the US on Blu-ray or DVD. I mean, it's taken quite a bit of time, and only recently are they even starting to release some of the older titles. I mean, just a couple of years ago, we got Junjo and Sekaiichi and what was that one? I can't remember. Anyway, and there's a lot of different reasons why. And it sucks because like you'll look at some releases and be like, wow, that titty title that's basically almost hentai got a home video release, whereas this one BL that's basically pure and soft and oh so good is just sitting out there waiting and may potentially never get one. Why can't I buy this? Why can I only get it in the Japanese version? And it all comes down to contracts. For many series, the reason why some companies are producing the titty titles, as I will call them, is because a contract says, hey, you want a really, really good shonen title that's going to bring you in all the fans and all the glory? Well, to get that title, you got to release this one too. So to get what we would call a AAA title, they're going to have to release the double D title. And that's just how it happens. And sometimes that is the case with BL, which is why, and I know there's a lot of mixed feelings on this title, Super Lovers. It got a release, whereas a lot of BL titles haven't. And I know Super Lovers, there are some people who are huge fans and some people who aren't, because some people find it problematic. But it all comes down to contracts with companies. It was tied in with another title, and that's why it got released. Now, whether or not it gets a dub also comes down to those contracts. And sometimes the company is able to push back and be like, no, we're not going to dub this. We think this is completely inappropriate. And there have been discussions as to why there's a double standard on releasing the titty title that's practically porn versus the BL title that is honestly less pornographic, but that's a whole other discussion that I don't have the time to get into. This also is the same with movies and OVAs. There was a lot of questions behind why Free it took so long for those movies to come over to the US. And again, it's all about the licensors just allowing the US to have them, to buy the rights. And then also the competition between the various companies here in America, which now is potentially going to be solved, but that depends, because apparently there's a whole thing about the US jury or something thinking that there's going to be a monopoly on anime. I don't know. It's wild. But just because a series is going to have an OVA or a movie, if the main series gets a home video release, you're still not guaranteed that OVA or movie. And it sucks. And I know, because sometimes the OVA may be the best part because it's got, those good scenes. But due to contracts, licensing, and sometimes the content itself in the OVA, it can't always be brought over to the US, or it wasn't included in the initial contract. And the team that was agreeing with the Japanese licensors didn't know there was going to be more. So they didn't know they needed to be like, hey, can we also get those extra goods in there? And they have to go back and try and renegotiate. So it sucks. And that's why it really is unfortunate that while we do have all these amazing companies that focus on BL manga, we don't have one that focuses on BL anime, because maybe then we'd have a lot more luck. But, maybe in the future. I'm going to put it out there. So visual novels. Why don't we see BL visual novels on our phones? And why aren't there a lot of them? There are a couple of reasons for that. So first off, Android and Apple actually have restrictions on content and age appropriateness. This also is why you can't technically read mature comics on certain comic apps, because for all these companies that have apps, Apple and Android will immediately delete their app from their stores if it has 18 plus content. And it sucks because, I mean, let's be real, a lot of the really good comics and games have that good content. But there's no way around it. And I mean, with Android and Apple being the only two phones out there, you can't get around it. So a lot of companies just don't bring those titles in, or they'll have a web version and maybe like a particular yellow and black app. You go onto the web version and you subscribe to the mature content, and then it happens to pop up on the app. Just putting that out there, just so you know. Anyway, but this is why it's the same for visual novels. A lot of the more mature BL visual novels cannot happen on your mobile phone. Also, Otome does a lot better in America. It attracts a lot more business. Currently, the company I write scripts for is split between Otome and Bishoujo. So they essentially relate it to girls and boy games. And for some reason, I write the Bishoujos, probably from watching way too much titty anime. And my editor did confirm that the Otome games do like almost 75% better than the Bishoujo games. And that's just a fact for a lot of the other visual novel companies. And also, I mean, when you look at anime adaptations, it's usually the Otome games that are getting those anime adaptations. Dramatical Murder being an exception, of course. But yeah, so that's why you're not going to find a lot of your BL games on your mobile phone. There are people in the industry working to try and change that. It just takes a lot of research showing the higher ups that, hey, look, this is a audience that you want to reach out to. This is an audience that's gonna spend the money to, you know, pay for those premium options, to pay for the extra storylines and things like that. But we also, again, have to circle back to the fact that there are aunties that are, you know, going to be in there because they're playing the other games, and then they're going to see a BL game and be like, this is problematic because I don't actually research things. So that's unfortunate, but we're trying, I promise. So what's something that's currently changing the tides, though? Well, that's going to be our international marketing. So within, like, I guess it's really been the last 3 years, Thailand and Taiwan have been literally making a splash in their marketing by having legit BL in their advertising. And it's been wild because even here in America, we barely add gay people in our marketing. And the moment we do, people lose their fucking minds. I mean, JCPenney, God forbid you show like 2 women touching arms and we're like, oh my God, the lesbians are at it again. But Thailand and Taiwan, they're over here having a whole Cornetto ad with these boys getting together, which we're going to spend 4 minutes watching it because we can. So, enjoy.
ผมเคยคิดว่าความรักต้องเป็นสีชมพูใครวะเพื่อนกูเองชื่อฟ้าเป็นลีดคณะแล้วเป็นดาวด้วยนะเว้ยอย่างมึงอ่ะอย่าหวังงั้นเดี๋ยวงานเฟชชี่ไนท์อ่ะกูจะควงฟ้ามาโชว์ตั้งแต่กูปะล่ะเฮ้ยมึงช่วยอะไรกูอย่างดิกลับแล้วนะฟ้าเพื่อนเราฝากมาให้อ่ะค่าจ้างมึงซื้อไอติมสีฟ้าให้เขาเพราะเขาชื่อฟ้าเนี่ยนะมึงเสี่ยวขนาดนี้ได้เมื่อไหร่เนี่ยเฮ้ยค่าจ้างกู คนเดิม
ฟ้าสวัสดีวันศุกร์
การแข่งขันกีฬาเฟรชชี่วันนี้เป็นรอบชิงชนะเลิศประเภทยิวยิตสึระหว่างบอยปีหนึ่งคณะวิศวกรรมศาสตร์และอ้นปีหนึ่งคณะนิเทศศาสตร์
อย่าลืมแผนนะเว้ยมึงอ่ะต้องล้มกูฟ้าเขาจะได้เห็นใจแล้วกูจะขอฟ้าเป็นแฟนทำตามแผนเลยอ่ะกูเร็วมึงเป็นไรวะทำตามแผนดิฟ้าดูอยู่นะเว้ยฟ้าดูอยู่นะเว้ย
มึงมาไหมอ่ะไม่อยู่กับแฟนมึงอ่ะ
กูยังไม่ได้ค่าจ้างมึงเลย
กูว่านึกว่ามึงมัวแต่หาสูตรสีฟ้าใส่เป็นงานเฟรชชี่ไนท์ซิ
กูเลิกทำอะไรเสียวๆแบบนั้นแล้ววะ
ไม่ใช่สีฟ้าก็ต้องสีชมพูใช่ปะ
สีชมพูอะไรวะ
เพราะคนมีความรักไงโลกมันต้องเป็นสีชมพูดิ
ใครบอกว่าโลกของกูเป็นสีชมพู
แล้วสีอะไรอ่ะ
สีดำสีโปรดมึงไม่ใช่เหรออ่ะค่าจ้างมึง
แล้วไปกันนะ
Good job man กูทำให้มึงหึงได้ใช่ปะ
ไหนบอกเลิกเสี่ยวแล้ว
เอามานี่เลยเอามานี่เลยกูให้มึงกินแล้วมึงทำกูให้มึงกินแล้วเอามา
ให้กูแล้ว
เอามา
มึงคือให้กู
กิน
ต้อง
กิน
I hope that made your hearts go doki doki. Oh God, I can't minimize it.
ผมเคยคิดว่าความรัก
I've made mistakes. Okay, that's fine. Nope.
ผมเคยคิดว่าความ
I've
รัก
made mistakes.
ต้องเป็นสีชมพู
Oh no. Please hold while I fix my mistake. Okay, sorry. I swear to God, I know how to use technology. Anyway, yes, so that's super cute. And I was reading the comments. Yes, there is Long Man from Japan, but true to the name, those commercials all put together are very long. So that's why I went with this one instead. Anyway, so BO marketing is huge in Thailand, as we've all started to learn, especially last year. What that was awakened to many of us in BL Garden with all the Thai BL, and I mean all the RPF, the real person shipping and real person fiction, and everything. I mean, they essentially make ships a whole brand, a whole marketing advertisement. And it's insane because you would think, Japan selling all this BL, that would be something they're doing, but they're not. I mean, yeah, they tease us, with like the bands and the pop groups. I mean, less so now. Korea's kind of taken that over. I miss my Visual K days. But I mean, still, this is something that just kind of almost came out of nowhere for a lot of us. But it's kind of awesome. And hopefully it's going to start having an effect, which for Japan it is, because we're now starting to see some of these Thai BL series being adapted into manga. And of course, US fans are becoming more and more familiar with it. And we're even getting some of the Chinese series brought over to the US for streaming services so that more people can get to know them and to watch them. And more so than just the anime series or the Donghua series, but even the live action series. I mean, if you look on Netflix now, there's Thai BL, there's Chinese BL. I mean, it's insane. We haven't seen that ever. I mean, it's only recent that this has happened, and it's so reassuring as a BL fan because it's like, hey, maybe this will start to get the American marketers to kind of wake up in a sense and be like, hey, let's maybe ignore the people who are telling us this shit is bad because clearly it's not if it's on Netflix. I mean, one can hope, right? But there are still other issues that we have to get over. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of companies still don't see Fusion as a huge audience. I mean, anime in and of itself is still a niche audience. As big as it has gotten, it's still niche. And because of that, us Fusion, I mean, we're even smaller if you think about it. We've certainly grown. I mean, I'm pretty much able to walk up to someone and be like, hey, yo, are you a Fujoshi? And, it's not so out of place because you look at someone, they've got like an Ida bag, or, you can tell from the shirt or clothing they're wearing, or maybe they have a tattoo. It's a lot more obvious nowadays than it was way back in the olden times, as I'll say. But the fact does remain, for many companies, we're not their main audience, and we're not as big as their main audience. And that's why they're going to cower when who they consider to be their main audience starts to kind of, yell at them for essentially pandering to us. Certain companies are also still having issues even aiming towards female audiences. So you can imagine that Fujin are even lower on the totem pole if they can't even advertise to females alone. Like that's a whole nother conversation. But unfortunately, a lot of the bigger companies do still believe that most anime and comics are for boys or for men. And it's unfortunate because it really does show in their tactics and their campaigns. I can tell you that there are a lot of people working inside these companies to change that thought process and to, let people know that, hey, A, we shouldn't be focusing on gender identity as a marketing tactic. And B, like, if you're going to look at things, I mean, a lot of research shows that women and more genderqueer types spend more money. So just something to think about. Another thing that comes up as a constant issue is that companies have a lot of fear when it comes to handling LGBTQ material anyway. And there's, of course, always going to be the constant battle between, is BL considered something that can be in the LGBTQ genre? Can we tie them together? Can we have them cross over? And because that's a battle in and of itself, if they can't even handle LGBTQ material, they can't handle BL material. And that's just the fact of the matter. And it sucks because they feel like they have to walk on eggshells when they don't. But there are people out there who are like aunties in a way, but are essentially the people who think they're speaking out for those in the community, but they really aren't, that get oversensitive. And, well, we just kind of fall back into the same problems we have with the aunties. But thankfully, because we do have BL focused companies that have started to rise up, that have become more popular, that have grown, we've made a difference. Like, because we are supporting these legal and authentic companies too, we're showing other companies that Fujians are an audience and we spend that money and they need to start catering to us because we're going to buy it because we want it. I mean, we've supported a ton of new businesses because we want the content. And like I said, a lot of people within the industry are working very, 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 very hard to make these changes. It's just, you can only do so much when you're a small group. But sometimes you can be a little subtle and get away with things and kind of do the ask for forgiveness after you do something. This happens a lot with smaller campaigns like Valentine's Day or White Day cards, promo videos, social posts, etc. So the next time you see something posted and you're like, this is super hinting at this ship. Did the writer, did the creator, did the designer know what they were doing? Yes, we did. We 100% did. We ship it, and that's why we made it happen. And we got away with it too, because either the brand manager was also on board or they were just really oblivious and we're really good at doing what we do. And you know what? There are other ways to, give a nod to people. Like, in art books where you can make really fun puns with certain characters on ice. So, just putting that out there. That's the most I'm going to reference a certain title. But of course, marketing in general is all trial and error, no matter what it is. A lot of mistakes are made. And a lot of those mistakes are unfortunately seen campaigns that would be great for us as Fusion, that would be great for BL titles being pulled down, being stopped, being canceled. But the fact that they're even initially approved is progress. So that's something to look forward to. I know it sucks, but we're getting there, and we're at least getting more content than we've ever gotten before. And that's, we're getting simulcast and simulpubs, which is, I can't even express how wild it still is to me. It's been happening for years, but I just think back to the days of slowly waiting for scans to upload onto my computer. And just remember that you need to continue to give BL focused companies all of your support, because at the end of the day, if they don't make the money to support title acquisitions, then we don't get anything. And even if you aren't a fan of certain publishing companies, I know there's one that starts with a T that people have a lot of mixed feelings about. If they have a series that you've been dying to get, it's worth it to buy it just to support the fact that the acquisition was made. Because there have been so many instances where maybe France got a BL title, but we didn't get it in America because the Japanese licensor, the author, saw that there was a problem with scanlations and illegal downloads, and it was happening primarily over here in North America. And they were like, yeah, sorry, we're not going to deal with that shit. So, that's a fact, unfortunately. So that's pretty much all I've got for you. I hope it didn't totally bum you out. I just wanted to kind of give you the realism of marketing and why you don't see it from non-BL focused companies. But I am happy to answer any questions you may have. Again, I'm not going to name drop. I'm not going to confirm or deny any suspicions. I will not say if there are any certain titles coming out or anything like that. I will, however, talk about the different jobs that are available in the anime and comic industry, because there are so much more than just being a designer or an artist. So feel free to ask your questions. And while that's going on, if you ever want to reach out to me, or if you just want to look at my portfolio and see why people decide to pay me money for what I do, here's all my information, because why not? Some people think I'm pretty good at what I do, I guess. Please don't make me sit here awkwardly, or I'll go grab my cat. She probably won't like that though. Oh, y'all don't know. The T wasn't a BL focused company, but they're a company that's recently been getting a lot of BL manga. That should clear it up. Can you go over some of the other jobs? Yes, I can go over some of the other jobs in the field. So, depending on which kind of industry you're wanting to go, I mean, there's always going to be a marketing department. And when it comes to marketing, they need everything. They need social media managers. They need brand managers. They need copywriters, which, of course, I'm very familiar with, designers for graphic design. They also need UX, UI design to do all their websites and things like that. There are video editors and promotional video editors. There's coding and all the technical stuff. I mean, pretty much if you think of a regular business, they need it in the anime industry. So it's not just people who do voice acting and people who can like do design. It's everyone. I mean, when I worked at the last anime company, we had writers, designers, voice actors, marketers, accountants even. If you want to work in like the creative marketing department of a company, there's a lot that you can do, and it is pretty cool. I will warn you, one risk when it comes to working in industries around hobbies and things that you like is there is a chance you will get underpaid. So just keep that in mind. Next one, if we see aunties trolling official Twitter accounts or publishers, is there anything we can do? The best thing you can do is, of course, report, block. You can tell the company to mute them. A lot of companies get kind of hesitant to like, oh God, I don't want to block anyone. Muting aunties is like a godsend because they don't realize really that they've been muted and there's nothing they can really bitch about. But reporting them, of course, is a huge thing. Don't engage with them. They want the attention, and that's the worst thing you can do. So don't do it. Next one, as someone who does a little proofreading and typesetting, how can I? Okay, proofreading and typesetting is huge in the comics industry. I highly recommend you look at, especially the comics apps like Tapas, Lazen, all of them. I know they have a lot of freelance that they're looking for, like proofreading or not proofreading, for typesetting specifically. Proofreading would, what you'd want to look for specifically is actually jobs for quality control editors. That's something that I actually currently do. And so you would actually be responsible for either localizing recently translated copy, or you would be the second quality control checker and you would be making sure everything looks grammatically good, that all the sound effects and all the edits have been made so that there's nothing like any of the original dialogue, like the characters and things like that, and all the grammar and punctuation, everything is good to go so that it can be published on the app. So that's some stuff you can look into doing. What is the hardest product to sell with BL manga? Like additional content or just like BL product as a whole? Because like it kind of depends on the company, honestly, and the contracts. Because I mean, like I said, like we had Super Lovers get a release, but then it took ages for, you know, some other titles to get releases. I know that for non-BL companies, you really won't see any BL merch made unless the title just blows up. And even then, for certain series that aren't technically classified as a BL, they get products, and it's, I mean, half of it's just because it happened to get really popular and it's not technically a BL. Hopefully y'all know what I'm referring to. But when it comes to BL focused industries, I know they definitely can't bring over a lot of figures just because some of the BL figures aren't super they're in SFW, you know, so those can't work out well, unfortunately. Okay. Is it true that there are Seiyu companies that don't let their actors? So this is kind of tricky. Sometimes it's not the company that's not letting their actors do the BL, and sometimes it is. But sometimes it's because prior voice actors who have been there longer and are less open to BL made complaints and therefore set a standard that BL was unacceptable. So then it became kind of a thought that, oh, well, we don't do BL. I hope that made sense. It's not so much that they don't allow it. It really comes down to some voice actors have actually made a stink over dubbing BL. So yeah, it's unfortunate. Let's see. Do surveys by anime and anime related companies actually work? How much of the feedback do they actually take from the surveys? Many people feel. Okay, yeah. So surveys do work. It is a lot harder for bigger companies to follow up on surveys than it is for smaller companies, though. I actually ran a BL survey for one of the companies I worked at, and it takes time, unfortunately, because a lot of times it's a huge amount of data, and some of the stuff that they're seeking, it does take time to process, get approvals, and then do. The one I did has led to there being like meta tagging so that people can more easily find the tropes and genres that they're looking for, and also to let the company know what kind of titles they should be acquiring based on people's taste and what they're into. For bigger companies, when it comes to smaller titles, which unfortunately something like Idolish 7 would be in America considered a smaller title, it's not at the top of their to-do list. Unfortunately, over here, idol anime and games are not as big of a draw or moneymaker as they are in Japan. And I know this, I worked on an idol show, a couple of them, and even though there are fan bases and they're super passionate, it still isn't a big enough fan base for some companies to put in the money and the effort to do anything special for them. So it's unfortunate. Yeah. Where did you? My hat is from. Hold on, she's on Instagram. I'm really bad at remembering names. Kitsch Hazel, Kitsch, and my dress is actually from Otaku. Unfortunately, she is no longer in business due to not providing product. So yeah, sorry, but the hats are still available and they're in different colors, and she also has some really cute ones that say Maho Shoujo that I really want to get. So next. How can ex-scanlators make the jump to legit work? I managed it through a crazy stroke of luck, but I know a few highly skilled people who would love to go legit, however they were. Okay, actually, that's when it comes to like freelance, because I assume you would want to do like typesetting and QC work and things like that. Having that experience is super helpful. Like when it comes to job searching, they really don't care if what you were doing was questionable. I literally have running FujoCon and BL Garden social on my resume, and people are hella impressed. They don't know what BL means, but when I tell them we run a virtual convention for anime shit, they're like, oh my God. They're not going to care. You could go get freelance work because of your skills working with like Photoshop and types and fonts and things like that. And yeah, it's absolutely worth trying. Put it on your resume because you gained skills from that, and that's all that matters. Let's see. How important is it to be bilingual if you want to work on BL? Is it worth getting conversational in Japanese, or would it be better? It kind of depends. For a lot of the comics companies, being bilingual, and not even in Japanese, actually in Chinese or Korean, would be super helpful because they are always looking for translators while they get in new content. Because of course the webcomic industry is booming. Like they are getting in comics like crazy. So if you want to be a translator, then yes, it's super important. If you're more wanting to like just work on fixing the comics or contributing to like helping edit it and stuff like that, it's not that crucial. I mean, I don't know anything but English because I can't for some reason, and I somehow get jobs. So you really don't need to learn another language unless you want to be a translator. It does help in some industries though, if they'll sometimes be like, hey, does anybody know X language and can read this whatever, and then you can help. So it's helpful sometimes, but having hard skills is also really nice to have. I saw that a BL series on Lezen will have English physical soon. Would you think do you think in the future more BL series like, it's all going to depend on the licenses that those companies get with the authors. Some of the artists who are creating those series aren't able to make actual physical content or do prints or do merch. So they aren't able to do that. Sometimes if the series becomes big enough, the company will back them to create said merch. So it really depends on what kind of contract they have. So that's the best answer I can give. Sorry. Let's see. How do scanlators contribute to the growth of the fan base and demand for English? So certainly back in the day, it was a sign for a lot of people who were starting to essentially take steps in the anime industry to show that it was worth investing in. Nowadays, it's less ideal to be a scanlator because honestly, the more illegal content there is out there, the less likely it could potentially come over to whatever language it's been translated in. I say America just because I'm over here in America, but we're an international con. So a lot more authors and Japanese licensors have become more strict about content being shared before it's been properly licensed, acquired, published, things like that. So they become very paranoid. And if they see that like, hey, we see that this entire series was, pirated, we don't want to bring it over. And that hurts us. So scanlators nowadays hurt our growth, unfortunately. I mean, when it comes, and this is mostly when it comes to like legit series, like manga and anime and things like that. Now, when it comes to like the magazines and Dojin's a blurry line, but like magazines and like drama CDs, that's a little bit different because we don't always have access to that kind of stuff still. I mean, thankfully with people like Rotten Blossoms, we are getting more access to doujinshi and drama CDs and things like that. But it's definitely not helpful any longer for there to be pirated content. I think I can do one more. So this is probably the last one. Okay, maybe the next one if I can answer this one quickly. I've seen a few arguments over whether a manga must have been published in BL magazine to be considered BL, whether being BL is a... Okay, yes. So in Japan, there is a lot of argument over if it's been published in a BL manga, therefore it is BL. And that does still kind of stand to the truth. I know there's been some outliers like 10 Dance, I believe is one, because it is a BL, but it's not published in a BL magazine. So there's definitely some like differences, and it very much depends. But then there's titles like Yuri on Ice where we really want it to be a BL, but it's not technically a BL. It's a sports anime. So nowadays, because there's just so much out there, it's getting hard to keep up with, well, okay, this was published here, so that's why it is officially here, but it wasn't published in there, so it does get a little harder to keep track of. So yeah. But I do think we are running out of time. Thank you all so much for listening to me ramble about my experience and things I've gathered from being in the industry. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for all your questions. And thank y'all for enjoying FujoCon. We're really happy to have y'all. So bye.